Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first lesson in JavaScript functions and variables. All right, you guys have taken some notes, answered some questions on a play posit. Now it's time to actually have some fun. So in a little bit, you're going to be logging into Khan Academy, and I'll show you how to get to where I'm at right now. And you're going to be doing some research and drawing some stuff and then showing me. First, though, let's talk about JavaScript. So what is it? It's a computer language, obviously. Duh. What do you think? What kind of question is that? Better question. Why use JavaScript? So it's a computer language. It's a front-end computer language. So it is loaded by the computer that the user is on. So we use it a lot in web pages because when somebody logs in with their browser, we want their browser on their computer to load it. So it's a front-end language. And it's also super easy. It's a very easy computer language to learn. So I'm not going to teach you a tough one first off, because then you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't do this. And you're just going to give up, and that won't be good. So I'm going to teach you the easy one. And then from here, you can take whatever you learn about JavaScript and you can go learn any other language you want. Most professionals recommend learning JavaScript first or Python first. I chose to use JavaScript because a lot of the other stuff we're going to do this year uses JavaScript. Python is what Scratch is written in. So we'll do that later when we get more into Scratch. But first, we want to focus on JavaScript, and you can use these skills later on. All right, let's get going. So reviewing a couple of things that we wrote down from our notes in the upper videos. We're going to talk about functions. So functions are a list of instructions that we want the computer to carry out. So JavaScript has something called a library, which has a lot of built-in functions. So functions that the computer will understand without us telling the computer what those functions actually do. One really cool one that is easy to get us started is how to draw circles or ellipses. So how in JavaScript could we draw an ellipse? I want to draw a circle or an oval on the screen. Well, I don't know. Maybe ellipse. Yes, that's how it's done. That's why it's easy and everybody likes to learn it, because when you want to draw an ellipse, you type the word ellipse. So this is a function. Don't forget your semicolon at the end there. This function has to take in numbers. We got to give this function numbers to do some stuff with. The computer's like, hey, I want to draw an ellipse. You told me to draw an ellipse, but how big? Where do you want it? And so we have to pass those numbers in. And these numbers that we pass into a function are called parameters. These are the things that we put into the function. So an ellipse takes 4 parameters. All functions take different parameters, and we have to learn them all as we go. There are 4, though. The x direction, so how far over in the x direction. Remember when we talked about monitors? The x direction and the y direction. So we start at the top left corner and then move in the x, move in the y. So the first one, x direction. So if I type in 30, let's type in 300. In the x direction, it will move it over 300 pixels. Next number is the y direction. How far do we want to move it down? So I'll say 200. And then the next one is how wide we want that ellipse. I'll say 250 pixels. And then the last one is how high we want it, and I'll say 200 pixels. So look what just happened. We drew an ellipse, but it's too far over. So let's move it back. Let's make it 150 pixels. There we go. So now we got an ellipse. Looks like a head, like a Stewie head, all squashed and weird looking. Okay, we just drew an ellipse in JavaScript. So another one would be a rectangle. So computer programmers are lazy sometimes, and one of those times is with the word rectangle. They just said, hey, let's just type rect instead of typing the whole rectangle thing. So rect is the rectangle function, and it takes 4 parameters. So it takes how far over on the x, how far down on the y, how wide do you want that rectangle, and how tall do you want that rectangle. And then, boom, there you go, drew a rectangle. So these are 2 functions, and they take in pretty much the same parameters, the x, the y, the width, and the height. Now, not all functions take in those parameters. These 2 just happen to take in the same parameters. So let's say that we want the ellipse and the rectangle to always be have the same X input, the same X parameter here. Well, maybe I don't want to have to change the number in each function. So a way that we get around that in programming is we write variables. So variables, another one that computer programmers were lazy on, is written as var for short. So that stands for variable. And then the beauty of variables is we get to name them. We can name them whatever we want. But to be a good programmer, you want to be specific. That way you know later on in your code what the heck you were talking about when you look at it 3 weeks later. So let's say we want to keep the same x direction. I'll call this variable x direction, and let's set it equal to 10. So what's the big deal? Why should I do that? So check out what I can do. Instead of typing 10 in each of these, I can type the variable x direction. But whenever I change it up here, it will automatically change it in both of these functions. So imagine if I had a lot of shapes that all had the same x variable, the same amount over in the x direction. It would not make sense to sit there and change every single one of them when I wanted them all to move. Instead, we could just make a variable for it, put the variables as the parameters, and then only change it in one spot. And we could do the same thing for every other part, every other parameter for these functions. So I can make a variable for y direction, and I can take y direction, and it's not going to copy the whole thing. I could take y direction, put it in for the y parameter, and so it will make sure that they always have the same y direction. So pretty cool, and I can do that with the other two as well, but I won't, just for sheer time's sake. So you probably noticed on the screen there's something radius here for a rectangle, and so that's a fifth parameter you can add to a rectangle, and that changes the roundness of the corner. So if I add another number, see how it made the corners of the rectangle round. So that's a fifth parameter you can add to the rectangle if you like. I guess that could be pretty useful when you're drawing different pictures and things, animations on the screen. Okay, so we talked about variables and functions, and that's all we're going to really focus on right now. We'll get into loops in a little bit, but right now what I want you to do is you are going to log into Khan Academy, and I'm going to show you where to go here. So when you log in, you'll probably be brought to something like this. If not, just click subjects at the top, because everybody's going to be different, so I'm just giving you directions that everybody can use. Go over to computer programming, and this is going slow for some reason. Waiting. There we go. So we have done most of the intro to CSS and HTML. We didn't do all of it. We skipped some of it. So now we're on intro to JavaScript, drawing and animation. So you're going to click intro to programming. And you're going to just start at the top here. So what is programming? It was going to show you a video. Then you're going to click this, blah, blah, blah. It's just some information you don't really know. Skip over it. Now where I am is I am right here on making drawings with code. So you're going to watch these first two, just so it shows that you've completed it and I don't mark you off in the grade book. And then you're going to come here, and this is where I just was when I was messing around. So instead of playing the Khan Academy video, what you're going to do is you're going to mess around with trying to draw some stuff. So try and draw an ellipse with the 4 parameters. Don't forget your semicolon. You can try and draw a rectangle. Don't forget it has 4 parameters too. Or you can look up some new shapes. Maybe you can draw multiple ones. Try writing some variables. And then you're going to let me know, and I'm going to come over and check to see what you have created. And then after this, after I check you off, then you're going to go back through Khan Academy and complete the rest of the modules there. But first, have fun. Draw some things. Make some variables.